Everyone knows Marty McFly, the wisecracking teen who travelled through time and into our hearts. I'm sure a lot of us could never imagine anyone else but Michael J. Fox playing that role. But there was once another Marty McFly, one quite literally lost in time. For 5 weeks, actor Eric Stoltz played the role. He shot the iconic scenes, time travelled in the DeLorean, and then he was replaced. His footage was buried and his performance lost.
Is it true that you had the Michael J. Fox role in Back to the Future?
Yes, it is.
What happened?
Well, I used to have a great answer for this, that in the sequels, they would go back in time to the point when I was in the cast, and it would all become explained, but I can no longer give that answer. What happened was the director fired me.
Why?
He didn't like my work.
But something about the other version of Marty McFly always stayed with me. Not just as trivia, but as something strangely personal. Eric Stoltz wanted to do something different with Marty McFly that would have changed Back to the Future forever, and that has always fascinated me. Because some stories haunt us not because we saw them, but because we never did. Eric Stoltz filmed almost everything, from the diner scene with Biff, to the DeLorean tests with Doc, to the emotional heart of the story, meeting his parents as young teenagers. But something about his performance felt different. Actor Thomas F. Wilson didn't have the best time with Eric Stoltz, saying he was too intense in the shoving sequence in the high school cafeteria. Leah Thompson enjoyed working with Eric Stoltz and described his acting as beautifully intense. Director Robert Zemeckis said that Stoltz was great, he just wasn't funny. Even Eric Stoltz is quoted later on as saying, "I was doing a different movie."
Well, he was very good. He was very good. It's just that they needed to have a comic, somebody with a more comic flair, like Michael.
Yeah.
And so they made the switch, but he wasn't like giving a lousy performance.
There was just whatever that wasn't clicking with the character.
Yeah, and he's a very good actor, a really good actor.
It's crazy how Eric Stoltz saw what everyone else wasn't seeing in Back to the Future. He noticed the weight in the premise. A kid caught in time, face to face with the broken nature of his family. What would really happen if you went back and met your parents as teenagers? What if you really did deal with the weight of time travel and the risk of not existing anymore? Eric Stoltz apparently played it that way, with feeling, with gravity, with soul. Eric Stoltz wasn't failing, he was building a different Marty. A Marty who didn't breeze through the past, but carried it. A version who wasn't just trying to get home, but trying to understand what home really meant. This Marty probably wouldn't have looked at George McFly when he first saw him with fear, as Michael J. Fox did, but with understanding. And you see that in this slight bit of footage that we see of Eric Stoltz. Maybe he saw himself in George's awkwardness. Michael J. Fox's Marty was just a cool kid, so he just didn't relate to his father. But Eric Stoltz's Marty, he might have related too much. In this version of Back to the Future, maybe adolescence wasn't all skateboards and one-liners, it was something more honest. Maybe Eric Stoltz's Marty went on a journey of self-acceptance. A young man learning to believe in himself, not by proving he wasn't chicken, but by proving he wasn't afraid. And this is the thing, Michael J. Fox's Marty didn't even get a real emotional arc until the second film, when the Nobody Calls Me Chicken subplot was introduced.
Nobody calls me chicken.
But Eric Stoltz, his arc would have started right there in part 1. And it would have been perhaps a more meaningful arc, as lots of people look at the Nobody Calls Me Chicken idea as kind of forced in. Maybe the clearest contrast between the two Martys isn't in a scene, but in a photo. The one Marty carries of his siblings, taken before any time travel happens, just a casual shot. But look at it. In the version with J. Fox, Marty stands there smirking, looking cool. But Eric Stoltz, he's looking at his brother and sister. There's stillness in his eyes, a softness. It doesn't feel like a pose, it feels like recognition. Even before the journey begins, this Marty already was seeing his family differently. It's a glimpse of the deeper story Eric Stoltz was perhaps trying to tell, one where Marty wasn't just swept into adventure, but aching for something more. I love to imagine this version of Back to the Future. I know people say that Michael J. Fox could never be replaced, and I love the Back to the Future films. I think they're some of the best films ever made, so this isn't me knocking Michael J. Fox, he's incredible. But I just have that lingering feeling to imagine what we would have seen with Eric Stoltz. A lot of people say this Back to the Future would have been too serious, but I think the comedy would have come mainly from Doc. I think he still would have had his manic energy, and pair that with Marty's quiet intensity, that contrast might have made both characters shine. And hey, maybe we still would have got a trilogy. Imagine after we had seen for 2 films this Marty McFly feel more, be more of a relatable character, go through an emotional journey and arc, actually feel the weight of this whole experience. And then imagine the ending of part 3. Imagine Eric Stoltz's Marty stood there, looking exactly how Marty does when he comes back from the Wild West, his version of Jennifer by his side, and then Doc comes back just as he does, and says those iconic words.
Your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it, so make it a good one.
In the version we got, that line makes us smile, but in this timeline, it might have made us cry, because this Marty needed to hear it. It would have landed not as a fun send-off, but as permission from this man he's looked up to finally let go of all the weight he's been carrying through this crazy emotional journey. Maybe even Christopher Lloyd would have shifted his delivery, making it softer, more bittersweet. When that time machine vanished, Marty would finally feel free, his best friend gone, but his heart set free. I always wonder, what would Stoltz's Marty have been across the trilogy? Someone who just doesn't rewrite his parents' story and struggle to get home, but finds a way to forgive everything he's been going through as well. Of course, maybe the filmmakers weren't ready for that version, maybe audiences weren't either. Somewhere out there, in cut footage, old stills and what ifs, that version lingers. Because Eric Stoltz was still Marty, he did play him, that Marty McFly exists. Maybe he and Doc are flying through time right now in a timeline just as real, just as valid. One where Marty felt more, reflected on the craziness of time travel, went on an emotional journey and still made it home. Maybe he would have never got the laughs, but he would have given us something else, a glimpse of what Back to the Future could have been if it leaned into the weight of time, not just the thrill of it. And if you think about it, some versions of ourselves, just like some versions of Marty, didn't make it to the screen. But they still mattered, and that's what this story really is. Not a mistake, not a lost performance, but a reminder that your future hasn't been written yet, but all the different pathways and timelines you could have taken, they all mattered. And just because you didn't go in that direction ultimately, somewhere out there, somehow, perhaps you did. If this video meant something to you, please consider subscribing. I make videos about the classic films we love and the feelings they leave behind. Thanks for watching.